Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an unjust episode of The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And here's your host, Alan Mosley.
Guys, welcome back to another episode of The Gold Standard. I am your host, Alan Mosley, and you can follow us on social media, which is facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. Twitter is at Alan M. Mosley, but you don't have to do any of that. You can just go to our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com.
That's right.
Also, if you want to support the show, consider becoming one of our patrons at patreon.com/TGS Alan Mosley. Now, we're going to get through our housekeeping really quick today because we kind of have a long... I don't even know if it's necessarily going to be a long episode, but we're going to talk about something pretty serious today. And I had considered a couple of names of people that I thought about having on as a guest to sort of bat this back and forth with me. And I decided not to do that because I don't want to ruin anyone's career with any conspiratorial nonsense along with us. So Blake's going to do that.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not
so
ruining anyone's
Blake's
names.
not going to do it either.
No.
So first of all, we want to thank our friends who always help support us and help share the show. We're going to start off with the other 3%, which is at the other number 3% on Facebook. I've got a meme from them. You know, we're not only doing meme of the weeks now every week, which is a good thing, but we're doing like double meme of the weeks because we've also got one from Liberty Memes.
Good.
When it's 2019 and you realize that there's literal hard evidence that the American government and most of the upper class are all involved in a secret assassination/pedophile ring, but everyone is focused on violent video games and plastic straws. Blake, that's whack.
It is whack.
So the other 3%, go ahead and give them a like. I also want to point to The Status Quo. The Status Quo is an awesome show run by our friends Nick and Matt. The most recent episode here, number 35, The Red Flag of the Red Flag Laws. Ooh. You know, we haven't really talked a lot about red flag laws. I have a hunch that it'll still be in the news come next week. We might talk about it then.
Oh, yeah.
But
I don't think that's going anywhere. If anything, that's going to get more intense.
But they've already covered that over at The Status Quo, which is thestatusquo.net.
Yeah, but we're going to want your spin on that next week. Tune in, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also, by the way, I just want to say this was my idea, but David, admin number 2 over at Liberty Memes, go ahead and put this one together for me, literally right before we started recording. Of course, you've got a picture from the Boondock Saints of the two brothers executing a guy. But of course, in this one, it's both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are about to execute Jeffrey Epstein. And he says, why not both?
Yeah.
So that's probably about all the laughing and fun we're going to have for today, because the rest of the episode's going to be admittedly a little dark. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, you had told me this would be a dark one, so
this is going to be a rough one. You know, I want to warn people before we take our first commercial break. I'm trying to do a good job of not using a lot of foul language on the show because we want to have our show shared on a lot of other platforms and networks. So we're trying to keep things clean. But today's show is definitely going to be adult and serious in nature. So you've been warned. I mean, I don't know anyone who's like letting their 6-year-old watch The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley, but I'm just telling you, you've been warned.
You've been warned.
So with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Hey, did you see the playoff games last weekend?
Oh, you're into the sports ball game.
Sports Ball with Mike Meharry and Alan Mosley. SportsBallPodcast.com.
Sports ball is not a libertarian sports show. It's a sports show done by a couple of libertarians.
For when you need your bread and circuses.
Your ad could be playing right now, reaching thousands of potential customers. Sadly, it's not, but it could be. Find out how to be an advertised sponsor for The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. Email us at tgsalanmosley@gmail.com. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the Jeffrey Epstein case today. And one thing I want to say as preface before we start getting into the weeds of all this is a lot of people ask, well, when you have a case like this where a lot of things are shady, to put it mildly, where do you get your information from? I mean, how can any of us really know what has gone on behind the scenes? You hear all sorts of different theories. Some people say that, you know, maybe the Trump had Jeffrey Epstein killed. Maybe he just committed suicide and that's just the end of that. Maybe the Clintons had something to do with it. I want to say hashtag Clinton body count trending on Twitter the other day was pretty fun to see. Or maybe another one I like, by the way, is that Epstein's actually alive, that they faked his death and they just got him out or whatever. I don't think I really believe that one, because I think the type of monsters we're dealing with, there are no friends. It's like there's no friends amongst thieves. They'd just kill him if they thought there was any chance he would say something they didn't want, or make something public. But I understand that it's difficult, especially in the era of fake news and corporate 24/7 news, is that people say, well, if I can't trust any of that, then where do I get my information from? I mean, there's going to be a million crackpot sources on the internet, but how do I know that they're any more or less legitimate than anyone else? And the tough answer is that, I mean, how can any of us know anything without seeing it with our own eyes, without having done the research? All I can tell you is that I certainly hope that you trust us here at the Gold Standard to steer you the right way. But I hope that you get information from a variety of sources and you compare and contrast. And above all, I hope that people are learning to form their own opinions. With that said, I've got a variety of different sources today for a number of the things we're going to talk about. I'm not vouching for any one of these sources per se. I'm not necessarily saying that any one opinion is the cold hard truth, because again, how could any of us know? But you'll find by the end of the episode that Epstein's not really the point. But we'll get to that in a second. So first of all, with source number one, it's coming from the New York Post. Jeffrey Epstein hanged himself with his prison bed sheets, according to a source. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting on this is he was found unresponsive in a cell, 6:30 a.m. on Saturday. They attempted to revive him. Of course, he was transported by ambulance, but he was pronounced dead. One point that I've seen made right off the bat, that Epstein was 6 feet tall, and that supposedly he had hung himself by the neck with bed sheets that were tied to a bunk bed in the cell that he was in. Now, for anybody who has ever done anything crazy like this, the body is miraculous at wanting to survive. And if you are tied in such a way that you could be asphyxiated, but your feet could also touch the ground and hoist yourself up, your body is going to react to want to live. It would take a great amount of control or discipline, I'm not sure what the word is, to force yourself to choke, if that makes sense. Now, moving on to the second thing is a lot of people have talked about, well, suicide watch. Why did he have any tools at his disposal to kill himself if he was on suicide watch? Now, that brings us to a source here from The Independent. Prison officer removed from suicide watch night before billionaire pedophile died. Now we've heard lots of different sources that are at odds with one another. Now, it's allegedly he had attempted to kill himself, some days or a week or two ago and had failed. And he showed signs of injury as a result of a potential failed suicide. Now, if that were the case, and this is he's certainly of no value to me as a person, but we'll say a high value inmate in terms of information he may possess or testimony that he could potentially give. It would seem to reason that if he were that valuable and he had already attempted suicide once, that he would absolutely be on suicide watch. Now, some sources say that he was still on suicide watch at the time of his death. Other sources say that he was for some reason removed from suicide watch, and then after he was removed, he then killed himself. That seems shady, needless to say, but we're going to continue. Now, the next thing from the New York Times, and I just got this a little bit earlier today, 2 guards slept through the regular checkups on Epstein, and then they falsified records to cover up their negligence. Now, so we've now gone from he was on suicide watch to he wasn't on suicide watch to we're not sure if he was on suicide watch or not, which presumably would mean that he doesn't have anything in the cell, hopefully, that he could use to kill himself, such as bed sheets to be hung on a bunk. However, he should have still been routinely checked on, and somehow he went a number of hours having already done the deed before he was discovered, and they supposedly had falsified records to show that they were checking on him, but that doesn't jive with, his actual death. And so again, you're getting all these different reports from these different sources, and all I can tell you is I have no idea. Anyone who says that they know what happened, how it happened, when it happened, who was or wasn't involved, they're just lying. But I will say this. The United States government has a history of not providing adequate support or protection for high-value targets. Now, I don't want to go in, I want to stay on topic today, but I just wanted to show this picture as just a little bit of a side to what I mean by that. Of course, that's a picture of Jack Ruby assassinating Lee Harvey Oswald. And, I've made mention to some of my close friends that while the situations are very different, this whole Epstein case reminds me a lot of the Kennedy assassination and then the subsequent killing of Lee Harvey Oswald in one particular way, and I'll explain. In a way that a lot of people reject the quote-unquote official story, the official narrative, the official account, the state account, the government account. Now, I don't know what happened. I don't know enough to tell you for sure what happened with the Kennedy assassination. I certainly wasn't there. But what I can tell you is that I have no reason to believe the official account. Why would lying liars lie, as my old friend John used to say, who's been on this program that did the Gold Standard radio show with me. And so when lying liars lie, why would I believe their account of the details? And so there's a few more links that I want to get to before we get to the end of my thoughts here today. Is that so who is Jeffrey Epstein and why does all this matter? Now, for people who haven't heard about the quote Lolita Express, let me explain really quickly what that is. So Epstein, first of all, Epstein was a billionaire, and he had numerous properties, beachfront mansions, and a private island all to himself where allegedly this pedophile ring existed and people partook in. Now, we don't know for certain who necessarily went to that island specifically for any types of nefarious acts as those, but we do have Jeffrey Epstein's little black book. We do know who he had associated with at different times. We do know who he had hosted on his plane. Now, maybe they went to that island, maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just having lunch one day and they went about their separate ways. So again, it's hard to say that any one piece of evidence points to guilt on anyone's part. It's more just this mountain of circumstantial evidence, and then knowing that you're dealing with people who stand to lose a lot and have no problem with lying. So a little bit talking about his particular associates. Now, of course, people on Twitter and around the country have been sort of politicizing the whole Epstein case to talk about, well, his death, who benefited from his death? Well, of course, people on the left say, well, President Donald Trump had Jeffrey Epstein silenced. He had him killed because Trump stand to lose a lot by showing whatever sort of nefarious involvement he had with Epstein. And of course, people on the right would say, well, of course, it was the Clintons. The Clintons had Epstein silenced because, of course, Bill Clinton had what's the word I'm looking for here, had partaken in the Lolita Express a number of times. The number I saw floating around was 26, that supposedly Clinton had traveled with Epstein 26 times. And of course, we're led to believe that, of course, all 26 times that Bill Clinton traveled with Jeffrey Epstein, never once did they do anything nefarious. No. It was all only Epstein and his closest associates. It was never anyone like our dear leaders. But the list is long, my friends. I mean, former Israeli Prime Minister Ted Kennedy, Alec Baldwin, Courtney Love, of course, Trump's and Clinton's, Prince Andrew of the royal family, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker. Oh man, I mean, it just goes on and on. Super magnate Ron Burkle, Hollywood mogul Lou Wasserman, Casey Wasserman, The lawyer Alan Dershowitz, Naomi Campbell, the former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. Those are lots of different people with different backgrounds, but the one thing they have in common is that they're the elite and you're not. You're right. Like it reminds me of the famous George Carlin joke of it's a big club and you ain't in it. Well, my friends, all of those people are in the same club. And if you're out there today listening to my voice and you're thinking to yourself, but Alan, I totally think Epstein was up to no good, and I totally think politician A was involved with him. That's why they had him silenced. You're probably right. But if you're using that as evidence to defend politician B, you're sadly mistaken. They were probably all in on it. Because I got to tell you, friends, it's a big club, and you ain't in it. So, by the way, remember that secret island where allegedly this pedophile ring was taking place? Well, of course, the feds are raiding the, quote, orgy island just days after his Jeffrey Epstein's apparent suicide. There's all sorts of video and photographic evidence of FBI agents in golf carts and on speedboats going around the island checking things out. Now again, the FBI is just a part of the cabal. They're just an investigative wing of the state. And so why are we to believe that they're genuinely investigating versus covering things up? Why are we to believe anything that they find or don't find? If the FBI comes back and says, we've found unmistakable proof that so-and-so and so-and-so was involved, well, maybe they're right, but there's no reason for me to trust what they have to say. Now, speaking of that, before we go on, since I've kind of talked about both the left and the right, I do want to point out really quickly, this is just a list that's been compiled. By the way, this says 27 trips. Clinton made 27 trips on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane, and that underage girls were involved. Again, there's no way for me to confirm that. There's just no way to know, but we can only look at all the information that's available and make our own decisions. So here's a list of, how many is this? Here's a list of associates of the Clintons that are no longer with us. They're the dearly departed. You have James McDougal appear at the parter, who was a convicted partner of the Clintons that was involved with Whitewater that apparently died of a heart attack while in solitary confinement. He was a key witness in Ken Starr's investigation. And you just scroll through the list here. Florence Martin, accountant and subcontractor for the CIA, was related to Barry Seal, Mena, Arkansas airport drug smuggling case. He died of 3 gunshot wounds. You can scroll down here to, of course, Kevin Ives and Don Henry, known as the Boys on the Track case. Reports say that the boys may have stumbled upon the Mena, Arkansas airport drug operation, a controversial case. The initial report of death said, due to falling asleep on railroad tracks. Later reports claimed the 2 boys had been slayed before being placed on the railroad tracks. But many linked to the case died before their testimony could come before a grand jury. And you've got more and more and more, along with a list of bodyguards of the Clintons who are now deceased. And of course, the most recent one being the DNC staffer, Seth Rich, who was, quote, mugged in D.C., yet robbed of nothing, and was murdered right outside of his home. So the point being is that it's not like this is an isolated case, is it? It's not like this is the first time that someone who stood to be in the way of the powerful met an untimely and suspect end. And it's certainly not the first time that government has played a role in, at the very most, being involved, but at the very least negligence in preventing it. Now, there's a couple of more philosophical points I want to make, but we're going to save those until after the break.
Have you ever been talking politics with a friend and told, if you don't like it here, you should just move to Somalia?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, from the sandy beaches of Mogadishu, Sherry and I bring you Postcards from Somalia, one of the newer products of Little L Productions, where we take on all of the fallacies of the people who say, if you don't like it, you can just get out. Your ad could be playing right now, reaching thousands of potential customers. Sadly, it's not, but it could be. Find out how to be an advertised sponsor for The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. Email us at tgsalanmosley@gmail.com. You still with me, Blake?
Oh, I'm here. I'm just listening.
Okay, I mean, you just every now and then I'll finish a line on my card here, and I'll kind of lean over and look over the monitor.
I'm here,
and
man.
I
I'm just
kind of
checking
see
this
you.
out, you know?
I kind of see you look like you've had too much to eat. Like you're like, ugh.
No, I'm just trying to ingest all this information. Actually, I haven't eaten anything. I'm starving, but that's okay.
Okay, well, we'll get something after the show.
There you go.
I can't stomach any more of this. I can tell you that.
This is too much.
It's a quick thing I want to read right here. You don't have to pull it up. It's just talking about the criminal justice system as a whole, and talking about how can this be a conclusion for someone who theoretically had so much vital information that could have implicated so many other people. If you want to understand what an absolutely enormous scandal Epstein's death is, understand this. In the whole American criminal justice system, no inmate was more in danger of suicide or homicide than Epstein, and everyone in law enforcement knew it, and now Epstein's dead. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. But pull that down, Blake. I didn't want you to pull that up. Everyone knew this. And of course, people were making jokes. I mean, and I'm not just talking about 4chan and memes, by the way. I mean, everybody. People were making jokes weeks ago that, Epstein's going to die. He's going to commit suicide in his cell. Now, where's that joke come from? Of course, it's not really a joke, is it? It was more of a prediction.
Yeah.
And I've already seen the corporate media and the Twitter brigades in full action saying that, well, if you believe that, you're a conspiracy theorist, and conspiracy theorists are kooks. You can't be taken seriously. Well, I don't like that whole concept of looking at conspiracy theory in that way. Like that term carries this negative connotation. Like when you think of the conspiracy theorist, you think of this, a guy that looks like he plays for ZZ Top, and he's the Unabomber, right?
Or
like
Mel Gibson.
Yeah, he builds bombs out on his shack in the middle of Wyoming, or whatever the case may be. And I reject that outright, because to me, the conspiracy theorist at a basic level is the person who rejects the, quote, official narrative. There are media and personalities out there that really revel in that definition of conspiracy theorists. They want to be seen as an authority of information. But the information that they parrot is just information that's coming straight from the U.S. government more often than not. And if you reject that, then they want you to be seen as a kook. Think about, say for instance, somehow as an independent journalist, you came up with very vital information about this case or a case like it. If they don't like what you're selling, then they'll paint you with that label. They're going to call you a conspiracy theorist, and they're going to cast doubt on whatever evidence that you may have. And they'll do that so that the mindless hordes out there are going to look at you, and they're going to say, well, you're not a reliable source of information, so why would I believe what you think? Now, in some sense, I sympathize with that, because look, hey, I don't just believe someone just because somebody says it. I want there to be a body of work to lead me to believe that they're a credible source. You don't, what do they call it? A confirmation bias. You don't want to look for things that just confirm what you already believe and you just assume those sources to be true. But it's always treading a thin line. And the criminal justice system in the United States is a joke. And furthermore, to that point and to the point of government having a history of things like this, I want to turn to this article right here, and I'm going to try to remember to share the link to this in the show notes, because we don't have time to go through every single one of these stories. But it is 32 short stories about death in prison. Subtitled, "These stories don't mention Jeffrey Epstein, but they are about him." And that's a really, really interesting perspective. And I found this article on Reddit's Gold and Black, so shout out to you guys if any of you are listening. These 32 stories are all linked and have their own individual articles. Several of them have adjoining video evidence of these stories. I'm not going to pull up all the different links, and I'm certainly not going to show the videos on this program because that just wouldn't be appropriate, but you can find it and look at it for yourself. I'm going to go through these stories really quick for you. Francisco Castaneda died of cancer in 2008 after having his penis amputated. His federal jailers repeatedly failed to offer any treatment for his metastatic penile cancer despite his pain and pleas for help. Terrell Thomas died of dehydration in a cell in Milwaukee after jailers turned off the water in his cell for 7 days. The jail was under the leadership of then Sheriff David Clark, a hero to law and order types. Jonathan Magby, a paraplegic in a wheelchair who needed 24-hour care, was arrested for marijuana possession in D.C. in 2008. He required a ventilator to breathe when he slept. The jailers didn't have the facilities to care for him, and so he died in jail. Andrew Holland died in a restraint chair in San Luis Obispo County, California. He was strapped to the chair naked for 2 days. You can watch a video of the guards laughing as medics tried fruitlessly to perform CPR. Story of Shamiki Pugh and Maurice Lee have laughter too, but I don't think it's funny. Maybe I'm humorless. Pugh and Lee were African American, and they were handcuffed helpless to a jail table where they were stabbed by a white supremacist as the guards laughed. Dale Rainey was an inmate in South Florida. Guards put him in a shower stall, locked the door, and turned on the hot water. Then they taunted him, saying, "How do you like your shower?" He died. Though witnesses said he looked like a boiled lobster, authorities declined to charge the guards. They said the skin peeling off Rainey's body must have been slippage caused by attempts to revive him. Michael Anthony Kerr died of dehydration, just like Thomas, near Raleigh, North Carolina. Kerr, an Army veteran, was off his medications, and he laid in his own waste for 5 days before someone figured out he wasn't eating or drinking. He was handcuffed the whole time, and they had to cut the handcuffs off of him because it was encrusted with his feces. David Ramirez, like Epstein, was accused of sexually abusing minors while he was in custody. Nominally under the care of jail guards, his cellmate drowned him in a toilet. Daniel Chong didn't die, but he very nearly did. In 2012, the DEA arrested him at a friend's house when it conducted a raid targeting ecstasy distribution. The DEA agents locked him in a cell and forgot about him, left him there for 5 days. He drank his own urine, attempted suicide, and even wrote a goodbye note to his mother before they found him. Jeez. Randall Jordan Aparo was not so lucky. When Florida jail guards refused him medical care, he became agitated. They sprayed him with chemicals of some sort to subdue him. His medical condition, noted in his file, caused breathing problems, and he died. The jail guards took to Facebook to ridicule him and celebrate his death. Christopher Lopez was in jail in Pueblo, Colorado. He had seizures. The guards thought it was funny. You can hear them laughing and joking in the video as he dies. "I can see you breathing," one of them says. Of course, that guard was mistaken because Lopez was already dead. Jeffrey Lillis was arrested and jailed in Arapahoe County, Colorado for drugs and theft. He was coughing up blood and begged for medical care. They only gave him Gatorade and cough syrup. He died of bacterial pneumonia in a pool of blood and vomit. Nice. Brian Perry had a Purple Heart from his service in Iraq, and he survived the war, but he didn't survive the jail in Clackamas County, Oregon. His jailers laughed and joked as he died of a drug overdose and took cell phone video of him. Quote, "We should go show this to his girlfriend and be like, 'You love this,'" one of the guards says. Lamikia Dockery told staff in an Indiana work release facility that she was having severe stomach pain and needed to go to a hospital. A guard recorded the response. "I advised her to stop over-talking me. Dockery had been vomiting repeatedly and couldn't eat, but guards decided she was malingering. She died of sepsis." Nice. Joseph Arquillo died of an overdose in a Cuyahoga County jail in Ohio. On video, you can see him lying still on a mat for about an hour. A guard checked on him by walking up and kicking his mat and then walked away. Richard Tavera hanged himself with a bedsheet and a sprinkler in jail in South Georgia, very similar to Epstein. A guard watched as he did it. Jail regulations prevented the guard from going into the cell on his own. He called for help. It took 10 minutes for the supervisor to get there, but that was too late. Yeah. Paul Bolthouse died after experiencing 17 seizures in a Muskegon County jail in Michigan. A guard watched through the windows as he suffered one and then walked away, apparently not taking it seriously. Michael Marshall died in Denver's downtown jail when he aspirated on his own vomit while being restrained face down for more than 10 minutes. Kenneth Dahlstra killed himself in an Ionia County jail in Michigan by drinking water for 2 hours until he died. He was on suicide watch. A guard told him to stop drinking, but he didn't. Timothy Souders died in the Southern Michigan Correctional Facility in 2006. He died of dehydration, chained to a concrete slab, and that was also caught on surveillance video. Chris Howard was arrested when he failed a drug test. He had eaten a marijuana cookie while on probation for drunk driving. Boy, what a hardened criminal.
Yep.
When he had a seizure, Gwinnett County, Georgia jail guards decided he was being aggressive and put him in a restraint chair where he died without medical attention. Alan Capers died in 2017 in South Carolina after another inmate stabbed him repeatedly during a riot. Guards dragged him into the prison yard and left him there. As he bled out, guards repeatedly walked about, looked at him, and walked away. The whole thing's on camera. Corey Wilson had diabetes. He was fine with treated with insulin, but he was in jail in Oklahoma City. They wouldn't give him his insulin, and the jail had a policy that guards could not call for medical assistance without getting their supervisor's permission. The supervisor couldn't be reached, and when he returned, he said that Wilson was faking it. So Wilson died. They did offer him a cup of water, though. Jeremy Allen Garza told prison guards in Michigan, where he was incarcerated, that he was going to kill himself. They allegedly laughed and told him to go ahead, so he did. Jennifer Lobato was arrested on suspicion of shoplifting about $57 worth of merchandise from an Old Navy in Jefferson County, Colorado. She told jail staff that she was in withdrawal from opioids. A deputy said, quote, "That's why you shouldn't do drugs." She asked for medical care and she didn't get it, and she died from vomiting so much that it caused cardiac arrest. Cristobal Solano was arrested for disturbing the peace outside a Key Lodge motel in Tustin, California. When he resisted a search of his mouth, 7 guards piled on him, pushing his face into a concrete bunk, kneed him in the back, and sat on him as he screamed, "Please, I can't breathe." Turned out he was telling the truth, and he couldn't, and he died. Andrew Arevalo and Carlos Perez were in High Desert State Prison in Nevada when they got into a fight. They were both in underwear with their hands restrained behind their backs, so it was mostly some shuffling and shin kicking. A guard shot them with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Nice.
Perez died. Arevalo was put in solitary confinement for 18 months on the theory that it was his fault that Perez died. Michael Tyree, a bipolar 31-year-old, was beaten to death by 3 Santa Clara County, California jail guards. His spleen was split nearly in 2 by the beating. Kelly Coltrane was stopped for speeding, arrested for unpaid parking tickets, and sent to a Mineral County jail in Nevada. She was withdrawing from drugs and told the guards that she needed medical attention. The guards gave her a mop to clean up her own vomit, so she had a seizure and died, and lay dead for 6 hours before guards discovered her. Carmen Getter, an infant, was born 14 weeks premature to her mother, Sinatra Johnson, in prison in South Carolina. Johnson believed that she was in labor and begged for help, but was rebuffed and sent to work. She gave birth on the toilet, and Getter drowned as her mother cried for help. Henry Clay Stewart Jr., 60 years old, was in the Hampton Roads Regional Jail in Virginia on a probation violation for a shoplifting charge from stealing $9.99 worth of beer. He began coughing up blood and complained of pain and begged for medical treatment. The jail said it wasn't a medical emergency, but it was wrong. Stewart had a perforated stomach ulcer and died. I know that's a lot, but the reason I read all those is to get a glimpse into that's the system. That's the criminal justice system. That's the government. That's the state. I've said this on the show before. I'll say it again. If I can do anything with this program, it's for people to understand, I want your default position to be to not trust government. Your default position should be not to trust the state, and the onus to be on them to sway you the other way around. You should not take the official count at face value, ever. Lying liars lie. These are the people that drop A-bombs on civilians and lock people in concentration camps. These are people that kill civilians every day, every year. Police brutality, civil asset forfeiture, taxation is theft. All those things that we like to talk about all the time. Well, we don't like to talk about, but they're reality. That's all the cabal. That's the elites and the enforcement wings of the state. It's all the same pool. That's what they're about. All the stories, that's what they're about. If that's what they're about, your default position should be to not trust them. WMDs in Iraq, whatever story you want to come up with. If they're known liars, you shouldn't trust them. In the same way that in your personal life, if you had a neighbor named Bob, and Bob was known as a storyteller and he always told lies, then you wouldn't go to Bob for concrete information on something serious. It's not because Bob told a lie in that particular instance. It's because you already know Bob to be untrustworthy. And so I want to end today with people thinking about, so what's the real tragedy here in this whole Epstein case? And I'm speaking definitely to the people in the audience who are parents, but even if you aren't, I want you to imagine this with me for a moment. Imagine you have a little girl or a little boy. Imagine you have a 14-year-old daughter or a 12-year-old daughter. Or imagine you yourself were a victim of something like Epstein's Island. You're the victim of some sort of wealthy elite, some sort of political elite, some sort of corporate elite. If you were a victim and you wanted to seek justice, where would you go? And who would you tell? Where would you be safe? Let's think about that for a second. Jeffrey Epstein was a billionaire. He was a billionaire connected to some of the most powerful people on earth. And when his alleged knowledge or testimony could have led to justice coming for some of the most powerful and terrible people on this earth, he's dead. Mm-hmm. Now maybe he just killed himself. Maybe the official story is totally correct. He was disgraced. He knew that his life, for all intents and purposes, was over, and he decided to end it. He took the easy way out, and that's what's done is done. And maybe the investigations will continue. Maybe they'll still uncover more without him talking. Maybe some others will go down with him, but I can tell you I certainly doubt that. But again, go back to my little hypothetical. Imagine that were you, or imagine that were your child or a loved one. If they were a victim of someone like a Jeffrey Epstein or a Trump or a Clinton, who cares? Where would you go? Where would you take them? Who would you tell? Where could you be safe? If a billionaire in federal custody with supposed round-the-clock protection / watch is dead now, where could you possibly be safe? I think the answer is pretty self-evident. I am more sure today than I've ever been about being an anarchist. Because this sort of power, unchecked, breeds these sorts of stories and then has that chilling effect on anyone else ever stepping forward to challenge it. Woo! All right, I think we're done with all that, Blake. How you feeling, Blake? You all right?
That was intense, man.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. You can follow us on social media. It's facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. Twitter is @AlanMMosley. But you don't have to do any of that. You just go to our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com. And we will see you next week.